Approximately 10 years ago, a little-known horror game hit the scene. It was called Five Nights at Freddy's, and the internet fell in love with it. Let's Play videos getting a million bajillion views, sequels released one after the other, merchandising for better or usually worse. People just couldn't get enough of these rundown Chuck E. Cheese knockoff freaks. What really got people tuned in was the lore. Turns out these lovable animatronics were actually possessed by children. And if there's anything 2010 tweens loved, it's something seemingly innocent having a twisted, dark backstory. Let's get one thing clear. This franchise owes its decade-spanning longevity to its ever-complicated and vast lore. But at some point, something changed. People are no longer excited when a new Fnaf lore dropped, but instead frustrated, because it usually complicated things more or provided a very unsatisfying answer. So I intend to solve the mystery, to figure out why this game's story became unsalvageable. I will be documenting each game from the first one to the sixth one in perspective of its lore, and what people knew about it during the time of its release. For example, during the section for FNAF 1, I won't mention any purple guy because we didn't know about him until FNAF 2. I will also be keeping tabs on a list of unsolved FNAF mysteries that we'll add to and cross off as we progress through the games. This will be a good demonstration to see if the story is either progressing by answering questions in later games, or regressing by adding more mysteries without solving any of the pre-established ones. At the end of each game section, I'll be recapping the lore of only the parts we know so far. It'll get significantly longer and filled with more holes than Swiss cheese with each consecutive game, but just as a disclaimer, this will not be a theory video, so for the most part, I'm not going to be providing any of my personal theories on events in the story. Instead, I'm just going to cover parts of the lore that are either confirmed or widely agreed upon. I have to include the widely agreed upon stuff because there's a lot of events that very likely happen and what Scott probably intended to happen, but aren't definitively confirmed one way or another because these games love keeping things open-ended. I'm not really going to be covering media outside of the games like the books, mostly because I haven't read any of the books, but also I'm only going to be talking about the games' lore. There are parts where the book's lore and the game's lore overlap, and I'll make sure to discuss those instances when we get to them. Without further ado, let's
dive on in.
The first FNAF game didn't really have much lore, which makes sense if you knew about the lore of Scott Cawthon. He had made many games before FNAF, but none of them were a smash hit. One of his games, Chipper & Sons Lumber Company, was panned for his visuals. The characters looked creepy, which...
It was scary. It was scary. It was really scary, and
Anyways, as the story goes, those comments inspired Scott to make a game where the creepy designs would actually make more sense. And so, Five Nights at Freddy's was born. Scott had no idea that FNAF would take off as it did, so the lore wouldn't have been a priority as he didn't know if there would be any demand for future installments. And this can be seen in the game itself. In FNAF 1, lore was only given out during the phone guy's phone calls or random Easter eggs you might see throughout the nights. The phone guy's call's main purpose was as a tutorial to explain what you'd have to do to survive Freddy and the gang. He tells about the pizzeria and how the animatronics get quirky at night, though he never tells you the real reason as to why the animatronics are seemingly alive. The only real nugget of lore he gives you is the
Yeah, sure, step aside, kid.
Yeah! Was that the bite of 87?
So just be aware, the characters do tend to wander a bit. They're left in some kind of free roaming mode at night. Something about their servos locking up if they get turned off for too long. They used to be allowed to walk around during the day too, but then there was the bite of 87. Yeah. It's amazing that the human body can live without the frontal lobe, you know?
You know, when I hear something like the bite of 87, my mind immediately takes note of it as something that'll be relevant later on. Anywho, the main chunk of lore in FNAF 1 comes through the newspaper clippings that can sometimes be seen while watching the cameras. To summarize them, 5 children go missing at a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, when a man dressed as a cartoon mascot lured them into a back room. Their bodies were never found, but there have been reports of a foul odor coming from the animatronics, as well as what appears to be blood and mucus around their eyes and mouths. Doesn't take a map out to figure out what's going on. Those kids were stuffed into those suits, and those animatronics are haunted. 5 kids equals 5 animatronics: Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, and Golden Freddy, which is another Easter egg you can sometimes see during gameplay. Now notice how little the lore played a role in that game. In fact, Since the newspaper clippings in Golden Freddy are random events, you can play the entire game without ever even seeing any of the lore. And that about wraps up the lore section for FNAF 1. So now let's move on to our list. We're gonna put down identity killer, what suit did he use to lure the kids, what's Golden Freddy's deal as we don't know how he fits into the core 4 animatronics, and who bit what during the bite of 87. That's about it so far. There may be other questions like who do we play as, but that wasn't something the fandom really thought was important during FNAF 1. I guess there's also how the animatronics got possessed. But we just kind of took that at face value, because why would we need to know why the animatronics got possessed? It's just some ghost haunting them. Why would there be any further explanation? So to recap, 5 kids were lured and killed by a man in a mascot suit. Their bodies were stuffed into the animatronic suits, those being Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, and Golden Freddy. The kids then began to possess the animatronics, making them come alive at night. Also, something got bitten by something in 1987. You might appreciate how short and concise that recap is, because, trust me, it's gonna get much worse.
Dive on in.
She is such a bad bitch, though.
In the second installment, Scott gave the lore much more importance, with the introduction of minigames that we can sometimes play after dying. This makes it more likely for the players to actually see the relevant lore tidbits as you die a lot in these games. There are also cutscenes after each night that show the animatronics from the FNAF 1 games, as well as the puppet, who we'll touch on more later. We also get more lore from the phone guy. Again, he serves as a tutorial for this game, while giving out basic info. He tells us about the toy animatronics and the Wyvern animatronics. The toy animatronics were built with security features such as facial recognition and access to a criminal database. The Wyvern animatronics are older models that have been kept for parts. When it comes to lore clues in later nights, he talks about the building being on lockdown concerning an incident where someone used a yellow suit.
The place is closed down, at least for a while. Someone used one of the suits. We had a spare in the back, a yellow one. Someone used it. Now none of them are acting right.
Important tidbit from Phone Guys, a mention of Fredbear's Family Diner, the original location of the Freddy's franchise.
We're going to try to contact the original restaurant owner. I think the name of the place was Fredbear's Family Diner or something like that. It was closed for years, though. I doubt we'll be able to track anybody down.
Going back to the death minigames, 3 of them show the children being killed by some sort of purple person, and 1, Give Gifts, Give Life, reinforces something we learned in the first game, that the core 5 animatronics were possessed by the 5 children in a missing children's incident. But now we know that the puppet from this game was the one responsible for giving the animatronics life. Unlike FNAF 1, lore that comes from random events are less important in this game. We have the Shadow animatronics, Shadow Bonnie and Shadow Freddy, even though I know this one is not called Shadow Bonnie, and they're not really that lore relevant aside from the game immediately after, but we'll touch on that later. I guess there's also JJ. I'm not sure what that is. At the end of this game, we get our paycheck with the date 1987, which means this is a prequel, as 1987 was the year of the dreaded bite mentioned in the first game. This is also further expanded on in the newspapers we see at the end of the game. That says the toy animatronics will be scrapped, but the Wyvern animatronics are being kept for a hopeful reopening, implying that that reopening is the one that we play in the first game. This also implies that the reason why the Wyvern animatronics come alive in this game is because they were the original suits the 5 missing kids were stuffed in. While FNAF 2 provides more lore than its predecessor, it's still lore-like compared to later games. That being said, it does feel like at this point Scott had a general idea as to where the story was going to go. Keep in mind the word general in that statement. Going back to our list, we're going to add a new mystery. What's the puppet's deal? As they seem to be as important as Golden Freddy with just as much information, aka barely table scraps. Well, maybe not just table scraps. We do see in one of the minigames a kid get killed by the purple guy, and a puppet jump scare right after, which heavily implies that the puppet was possessed by another dead kid, but who is not included in the missing children's incident as we don't see the purple guy take their body, implying that their body was likely found. Also, there were only 5 kids mentioned in the missing children's incident, not 6. Also, just look at the puppet. It doesn't really fit with the animal mascot theme the current lineup of the animatronics have. And on that point, Balloon Boy, because whose kid is this? Before we go into FNAF 3, let's recap the main story so far. Freddy's Pizzeria's first location was Fredbear's Family Diner. Later on, 5 kids were lured and killed by a man in a mascot suit. Their bodies were subject to animatronic suits, those being Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, and Golden Freddy. The kids then began to possess the animatronics with the help of the puppet, who was another animatronic possessed by a kid done dirty by the purple fella. They now come alive at night. In 1987, a new and improved location opens with the toy animatronics, who have built-in facial recognition features as well as an access to a criminal database. Also, someone got bitten by something during this year. This new pizzeria closes either due to an incident where the killer, aka the purple guy, may have killed additional kids, or because of that bite we heard so much about but have been done. After its closure, the ending newspapers say that the toy animatronics will be scrapped, but the river animatronics will be kept for a hopeful reopening. And that reopening is the location we play as in the Fnaf 1 game. So here's the first of many questions that muddle the lore. Why did the Fnaf 2 pizzeria close? The ending newspaper doesn't tell us, it just says it's suddenly closing after only being open for a few short weeks. Some people think that the incident that the phone guy referred to was the purple guy doing something similar to what he did during the missing children incident. Evidence for this includes the dead bodies shown in the Save Them minigame. These should not be the missing children incident bodies as we play as with or Freddy during the minigame, suggesting that he's already possessed. Which means that the bodies shouldn't just be laying out and about like we'd see in the minigame, they should be inside animatronic suits. So it suggested that this is actually another murder Purple Guy did, but unlike the other one, these kids weren't lore relevant enough to possess animatronics. So that tracks, a murder should close down a restaurant, but other people, and what I think the majority, suggest that this pizzeria was closed due to the bite of 87. During the first 6 nights we play as a guy named Jeremy. On night 6, Phone Guy says that the player will be on the day shift, so on night 7 we play as a different guy, Fritz. So we don't know what happened to Jeremy during the day shift, but some believe he was what got bitten during the bite of 87, which is why the pizzeria closes after night 7. This game gives us 0 references to the bite, so it's really just an inference, but both incidents would be grounds to close the pizzeria. In fact, it could be that both happened and contributed to its closure. We still don't know, and that's the problem. What closing down a pizzeria is important to the overall narrative, and yet we don't have an answer, and we'll never get the answer. Bite of 87 and the second murder incident is never referenced again in the games. We never see the bite of 87, and we never get context for the dead bodies in the Save Them minigame. We're left to our own speculation, and not getting context or closure is going to become a very recurring theme. So with that, we add why did the Fnaf 2 pizzeria close to our list.
Dive on in.
Before we dive in, let's talk about Dako's interview with Scott Coffin. For those not in the know, Dako is a popular Fnaf YouTuber, and he got the chance to interview Scott for beating 50/20 and Ultimate Custom Night, which I'll expand upon later. During this interview, Scott provides a lot of context for how he developed the games from 1 to 6. And for Fnaf 3, I want you to pay close attention to this clip. Here, Dako asked Scott if Fnaf 3 was supposed to be the last game.
So, the good ending, it was very, sad, and it seemed like it was like the end of the franchise. Was this meant to be the final game?
I think when I was making that game, in my mind, that was the end of a trilogy.
Yeah.
I think in my mind, the story was going to be 3 games. And in all honesty, I think Five Nights at Freddy's 3 was where I kind of started letting myself be driven a little bit more by criticisms of the game than maybe I had before. Before, everybody was just really, really excited, happy to have all this stuff. But whenever 3 came out, I really was starting to pay attention to criticism. For instance, even though I may have, in some, alternate life, may have left the series alone at 3, people were not happy with the jump scare, and it's kind of as simple as that. People weren't happy with the jump scare of Springtrap, and that really bothered me. And so then that kind of, in my mind, that wouldn't let the series rest in a way, because I wanted to make another entry that was really, really scary again.
Alright, so he said, in an alternate life, I may have left the series alone at 3. So he didn't really answer the question, but in my interpretation, he was either going to stop at or conclude the original story at 3, but didn't because Fnaf 3 wasn't that scary, especially the Springtrap jump scare, which... The Fnaf 3, the endings really give off the vibe that this game was supposed to wrap up the story. So for this section, I'm going to analyze the lore in the context that the story was probably supposed to end here. Fnaf 3 takes place in the distant future. The pizzeria from Fnaf 1 has long been closed down, and now we're in Fazbear Frights, a horror location that marks itself off the tragedies that happened in the old Freddy's locations. We play as an unnamed security guard who's only on the watch for one animatronic, Springtrap. Vintage Phone Guy Calls gives us the context on the yellow rabbit. He's a spring lock suit, which means he can be used as an animatronic as well as a suit by using spring locks to keep the sharp robot parts away. Of course, this is a very bad idea.
When using an animatronic as a suit, Please ensure that the animatronic parts are tightly compressed and fastened by the spring locks located around the inside of the suit. It may take a few moments to position your head and torso between these parts in a manner where you can move and speak. Try not to nudge or press against any of the spring locks inside the suit. Do not touch the spring locks at any time. Do not breathe on the spring locks, as moisture may loosen them and cause them to break loose. In the case that the spring locks come loose while you are wearing a suit, please try to maneuver away from populated areas before bleeding out, as to not ruin the customer experience.
Anyways, in this game, the lore really comes from the minigames, which are two groups of, the ones you get after each night and the ones you unlock by pressing wall tiles. Basic minigames show Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy following Shadow Freddy to a secret area, but it's trapped by the purple guy who takes them apart. Why? Put a pin that. The last minigame shows the ghosts that haunted the suits confront purple guy, who puts on the yellow rabbit suit to I guess scared him off, but remember, this is a spring lock suit, and the spring locks malfunction due to the rain leaking from the ceilings. Purple guy gets impaled by the suit's animatronic parts and slowly dies in the corner, but as we know, he persisted and became Springtrap, who we face off during the nights. The final newspaper shows that Fazbear Frights burns down, but if you brighten it up, you see that Springtrap may have made it out. But turns out you got the bad ending because you didn't click on wall tiles. So this ending gives some finality to the killer storyline. We still don't know who the purple guy is, but we do know that the spirits got revenge for what he did, and now he's spent the eternity in the same fate they had to suffer through, being a cheap animatronic for a mediocre entertainment establishment. The good ending requires the player to find cupcakes and click wall tiles to find secret minigames. In these secret minigames, you play as Balloon Boy, Mangle, Toy Chica, Fredbear, and Shadow Bonnie, or I don't really know what Scott was doing with that one. Anyways, you're supposed to go out of bounds in the minigames and find a crying child. When you interact with them, you give them a big cake and the game ends. The last minigame is called Happiest Day. You play as the puppet and go through a party. You see the crying children wearing the masks of Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, and encounter the final crying child. You give them the cake, and they put on the golden Freddy mask. After this, the children disappear and their masks fall to the ground. You then get the good ending, which shows the core 5 masks without being lit up, unlike the bad ending. This may show that the children that possess the animatronics have finally moved on, put a pin that. So imagine if the story ended here and there were no more games. Yes, there are still unanswered questions. Going back to the list, none of them were actually answered besides what suit did the killer use. But somehow, it still felt like a satisfying ending. The killer got what he deserved, and his victims were finally freed from their animatronic prisons, allegedly. The point is that in this moment in time, the Fnaf lore was understandable. Yes, there were still unsolved questions, but the story had a full narrative, and there was still such a thing as a cohesive timeline. But if Scott had to make a new game to redeem FNAF free, not being scary, hopefully it's an entry that clears up unsolved mysteries and doesn't fundamentally break everything we know about this franchise. But hey, I didn't have to add anything to the list, that's nice. Oh wait, never mind. We have to add why did the purple guy dismantle the animatronics, cause like... Before we suffer, let's recap the main story so far. Freddy Pizzeria's first location was Fredbear's Family Diner, and it featured 2 Springlock animatronics, Fredbear and Spring Bonnie. Later, 5 kids were lured and killed by a man in the Spring Bonnie suit. Their bodies were stuffed into the animatronic suits, those being Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, and Golden Freddy. The kids then began to possess the animatronics with the help of the puppet, who was another animatronic possessed by a kid done dirty by a purple fella, and now come alive at night. In 1987, a new and improved location is opened, now with the toy animatronics who have built-in facial recognition features and access to the criminal database, likely as a response to the missing children's incident. Also, someone got bit by something during this year. This new pizzeria closes either due to an incident where the killer, aka the purple guy, may have killed additional kids, or because of that aforementioned bite. After its closure, the toy animatronics will be scrapped, but the Whiffer ones will be kept for a hopeful reopening. And that reopening is the location we placed in the FNAF 1 game. That location also closes, and 30 years later, Fazbear Frights opens with a horror attraction based on the tragedies that happened in the previous locations. This attraction has Springtrap, who is actually the purple guy that got trapped in the suit during some point after FNAF 1. During FNAF 3, we play minigames which allegedly freeze the original 5 spirits as well as the puppet. Fazbear Frights burns to the ground, and Springtrap maybe survives. He always seems to come back. Would it be crazy if everything I just said right now actually turned out to be the nightmares of some kid who cries a lot? Who do we play as in the FNAF 4 nights? We don't know. In the FNAF 4 nights, we are in a bedroom trying to keep the nightmare animatronics from getting in. There's a Nightmare version of the Core 4, Fredbear, and Nightmare, which is a recolor of Nightmare Fredbear. Now, are these animatronics real or nightmares? Could have been that. Well, how about who he plays in the FNAF 4 minigames? The minigames in this game are a lot more expansive than before. You can now talk to NPCs and explore a small map. You play as some sort of crying child. What's her name? We don't know. He's accompanied by some sort of imaginary friend plushie of Fredbear, who may or may not actually be imaginary. He offers guidance to the child and warns him of his older brother, who likes to make fun of him. Whose kids are these anyways? Probably the purple guy, with evidence we'll get from Sister Location, which will likely make the older brother Mike, who again we'll learn more about in Sister Location. So some claim that the crying child is actually Mike, and some claim that the family isn't even purple guys but instead his business partners that may or may not have been stolen. And his business partner is someone we'll get to later, and there also may or may not be a sister who has a room in this game that has Mangle for some reason, and the sister is someone we'll also get to later. Spoiler alert, the older brother puts the crying child in the mouth of the Fredbear animatronic, which bites his frontal lobe off, putting him in a coma, as you can sometimes see in the night an IV bag, a pill bottle, and flowers. The last minigame shows a crying child dying, as we can hear in the background that beep you hear from a heart monitor when someone's heart stops. During this we see two different dialogues. One is probably from the brother as he apologizes. The other is from someone as they say, "I will put you back together." And if you play the final night, you see the image of a locked box, with text popping up that says, "Perhaps some things are best left forgotten, for now." That box will never be opened. So that was a lot to throw at you, right? Well, imagine how it was to theorize with all that on the table when that game was released. And Scott's reaction to this is really what infuriates me. I want you to pay attention to Scott's Steam post about this game's Halloween DLC. In the post, he goes over what will and won't be included, and it's really not that important because the DLC isn't really canon, except for maybe Nightmare Balloon Boy and Nightmare Marionette, kinda. Anyway, Scott wrote, "Now I want to talk about what won't be included, the box. You know, when I released the first game over a year ago, I was amazed at how quickly everyone found every bit of lore and story. Then the same happened with Part 2, fans and YouTubers dug in and found everything. Game Theory did an incredible video on Part 2, getting almost everything right. Then Part 3 came out, and once again the story was uncovered by the community. It seems that there was nothing I could hide. But then I released Part 4 and somehow, not a single person found the pieces. The story remains completely hidden, and I guess most people assume that I filled the game with random Easter eggs this time. I didn't. What's in the box is the pieces put together. But the bigger question is, would the community accept it that way? The fact that the pieces remained elusive this time strikes me as incredible and special, a fitting conclusion in some ways. And because of that, I decided that maybe some things are best left forgotten forever."
Alright, so y'all just seen that corny ass shit.
For context, Scott wrote this post on August 24, 2015. FNAF 4 came out on July 23, 2015. He gave the fandom 1 month to figure out the lore, and when they couldn't, he said, "You know what? Now you'll never find out the lore because somehow that's a fitting conclusion." I have no idea what was going for his mind or his decision, but I do have a theory. Okay, as you can see, that post is really weird, right? Why is he being so cagey about the lore in this game in particular? Notice what he said. What's in the box is the pieces put together. But the bigger question is, would the community accept it that way? You see, there was actually a big theory about this game that was covered by Game Theory's Matthew Patrick, RIP, himself. Dream Theory. It goes that the nightmare animatronics are actual nightmares, but that's not all. Actually, FNAF 1, 2, and 3 are also nightmares being had by this crying child during his coma. Evidence for this includes a grandfather clock that was heard after each night in all 3 games, which is something you may hear when waking up from a dream. And importantly, what Scott said. Oh, and for context, Matthew Patrick. I mean, do I have to tell you about him? Surely if you clicked on this video, you have seen this man before, right? MatPat was one of the biggest FNAF theorists, and he hosted a live stream on his Theory channel trying to solve FNAF 4 with a bunch of other FNAF theorists. During the stream, Scott posted images on his website that were clues into FNAF 4's lore. They are, in the FNAF 4 minigames, why would a tiny toy Chica be missing her beak? What's seen in the shadows is easily misunderstood in the mind of a child. 4 games, 1 story. What do those mean? Well, in Dream Theory, the tiny toy Chica missing her beak is why Toy Chica in FNAF 2 loses her beak. She's a literal representation of the toy that the crying child saw, which points in the favor that FNAF 2 was actually in his dream. Then the next one shows that the events in the games like the purple guy's killings was actually misinterpreted by the crying child. During the minigames, you can unlock an Easter egg showing the purple guy putting someone in a suit. To us, we know that this someone was using a springlock suit, but to a child, it could be seen as the purple guy stuffing someone into a suit. 4 games, 1 story. If the free games are each a nightmare the crying child is having, this means that they all connect to the story being told in Fnaf 4. Okay, so in retrospect, there wasn't really much going for this theory, mainly because it would be lame to have everything just be a dream. But what Scott said in the Steam post and teasers makes it seem like this was the direction he was going in. And when the fans finally figured it out and got angry at how stupid it was, he backtracked and said, oh, actually, let's just forget about Fnaf 4 and move on. The box? Who won about it? Who cares? Just forget it. You know, some things are best left forgotten forever. This point is where the Fnaf 4 went wrong. You can't tell a story and just have us forget a major part of it. You can't have a box at the end of your game and never open it. What's the point of the box? You can't just have an element of the story without a point. But now we don't have that, because to this day we still don't fully know what even happened in Fnaf 4. We don't know where he goes in the timeline, we don't know who the crying child is, and he will never be referenced again. Yeah, think about that. Why is this kid so important? What was the point of even including him if he was never going to be brought up again? What was even the point of Fnaf 4? To make a scary game that Fnaf 3? Guess what, Scott? Fnaf hasn't been scary since the first game. Okay, here's the list. Nothing was solved and more things were added. Oh wait, actually this game had the bite of 87. Yeah, the bite. The minigame showed the crying child had its frontal lobe bitten off by Fredbear. Oh my god, FNAF 4 actually solved something. FNAF 4 actually solved something. What was that? If you stand close to the TV, it flashes 1983. And also if you input that into the walls in search location, you see the footage of the crying child's bedroom. So this game takes place in 1983. So it's a completely unrelated bite. So adding to our list, what was the crying child's fate? Did he possess an animatronic? If he did, was it Fredbear or maybe the puppet because of the similar stripes? Also, what was his Fredbear plushie? Was it imaginary? Did it really talk? What's up with that? And what are the nightmare animatronics? Are they, well, nightmares or are they real? Are they hallucinations caused by huffing gas or by sound? On that topic, who do you even play as in FNAF 4? During the actual night, is it the crying child's loser or his loser older brother? And who says, I will put you back together? And what the hell does that even mean? And what's in the box, Scott? Before we meet our sister, let's recap the main story so far. And just keep in mind, because of all the points I brought up before, it's going to be really hard to fit FNAF 4 into the main story. So, I'll try my best. Freddy Pizzeria's first location was Fredbear's Family Diner, and it featured 2 Springlock animatronics, Fredbear and Spring Bonnie. A kid got his frontal lobe bitten off in 1983. 5 kids were lured and killed by a man in the Spring Bonnie suit. Their bodies were stuffed into animatronic suits, those being Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, and Golden Freddy. The kids then began to possess animatronics with the help of the puppet, who was never an animatronic possessed by a kid done dirty by the purple fella. They now come alive at night. In 1983, a new and improved location opened up to 20 animatronics with built-in facial recognition features and access to a criminal database. Likely as a response to the missing children's incident. Also, someone got bitten by something there this year. A lot of people are getting bitten by animatronics these days. This new pizzeria closes either due to an incident where the killer, aka Purple Guy, may have killed additional kids, or because of that aforementioned bite. After its closure, the 20 animatronics will be scrapped, but the Whiffer ones will be kept for a hopeful reopening. And that reopening is the location we play as in the FNAF 1 game. That location also closes, and 30 years later, Fazbear Frights opens, which is a horror attraction based on the tragedies that happened in the previous locations. This attraction has Springtrap, who is actually the purple guy that got trapped in the suit during some point after FNAF 1. During FNAF 3, we play minigames which allegedly frees the original 5 spheres as well as the puppet. Fazbear Frights burns down and Springtrap maybe survives. He always seems to come back. So notice how in the entire thing FNAF 4 only got 1 line? Since we are still trying to figure out what happened in that game, it's unclear what things were actually lore relevant. We don't know if the crying kid actually possessed anything, or if the animatronic sequences meant anything. Some interpret the whole crying kid stuff as the purple guy's motivation. You need context from the later games to come up with this. We don't know for sure who said, I will put you back together, but if it was the purple guy who said this as a sign, maybe him killing was a way to experiment with bringing back the dead, even though the puppet was the one to bring the animatronics to life. So I guess he could have seen the animatronics being possessed, and after his son died, and then started to experiment. Which would give context for what happens in sister location, but it means that you have to kill the original 5 plus the kid who got possessed by the puppet before all that. So it was a killer without motivation for his first 6 kills, so I guess none of this matters. So welcome to the intermission sections. So these are just a way to include info that doesn't really fit into the main game sections. These can include outside media that was released during this time, or less relevant games, or just quandaries that were really bugging the fandom at the time. So first we have, the first FNAF book was released after FNAF 4. They aren't canon to the games but are instead an alternate retelling, but there are some details from them that just kind of show up in later games. All you need to know from the books for now is 3 names. William Afton, who is the purple guy confirmed in sister location and Pizza Sim, Henry, who co-founded Fredbear's with William, which is strongly alluded to in Pizza Sim, and his daughter Charlie, who possessed the puppet, also confirmed in Pizza Sim. So FNAF World was this weird thing Scott tried to do after FNAF 4, where he decided to make an RPG with the FNAF characters. And I could have sworn originally he said it wasn't going to be lore relevant, but you know him. But the thing about FNAF World is that he kind of just pushed it to the wayside after everyone complained about how it wasn't really that good. So any lore hints in that game are kind of not used anymore. There are files in this game showing the FNAF 4 box being opened. It wasn't. So I guess we could put FNAF World on the Unsolved Mysteries list because we have no clue what that game was trying to say.
Dive on in.
Sister Location was really Scott's last chance to salvage the FNAF story. The fandom had no idea what to take away from FNAF 4, and FNAF World and the Silver Eyes just threw a bigger wrench into everything. If this game didn't have a story held together, the masses would poison Scott's water supply, burn his crops, and deliver a plague upon his house. Suffice to say, the stakes were high. So did Sister Location deliver?
Well, sorta, kinda.
In Sister Location, you play as Mike, which is confirmed in the final cutscene in Sister Location's Custom Night DLC. We also find out that Mike's father is Springtrap, aka Willie A. Mike works at Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rentals, which is an underground facility which rents out animatronics for parties and events. In the lineup of these animatronics are the Fun Times, put a pin in those, Circus Baby, who was originally a part of Circus Baby's Pizza World, which opened at some time, and Ballora, which I don't know what went through William or Scott's head when designing her. During Circus Baby's Pizza World, William's daughter, who in Pizza Sim we learned is named Elizabeth, gets scooped by Baby and later possesses her, changing her eye colors from blue to green, woo. As Mike works in the rental place, throughout the nights he listens to the guides to Circus Baby as he tries to not get killed by the other animatronic. But uh-oh, turns out this was all a trick by Baby the entire time. During the final night, she leads Mike to the scooping room, which is used to scoop the animatronics endoskeletons out of their outer shell. Probably for Remnant, put a pin in that. Anyways, Mike, I guess, gets all of his organs ripped out of him, and Baby, Ballora, Funtime Freddy, and Funtime Foggy fuse together into Ennard and crawl inside him, basically wear him like a meat suit. In the Custom Night minigames, we see Mike post-enderification slowly turn purple, and eventually barf out Ennard. Baby says he won't die over and over, and guess what? He doesn't die. After this, we get a cutscene which slowly pans over Bert Fazbear fights.
Father, it's me, Michael. I did it. I found it. It was right where you said it would be. They were all there. They didn't recognize me at first, but then they thought I was you. And I found her. I put her back together, just like you asked me to. She's free now. But something is wrong with me. I should be dead, but I'm not. I've been living in shadows. There is only one thing left for me to do now. I'm going to come find you. I'm going to come find you.
So this tells us that Mike went into the bunker on his father's request. Now, timeline-wise, it gets confusing, so Willie must have told Mike about the bunker before he got Springtrap, but after Freddy's closed, as we hear about Handy Unit that Circus Baby's Rentals opened after its closure.
Due to the massive success, and even more so the unfortunate closing of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, it was clear that the stage was set, no pun intended, for another contender in children's entertainment.
We're not sure how long Ennard was piloting Mike, but the cutscenes imply that it wasn't very long as he was quickly decomposing. And we know that this has to be after William got Springtrapped, as Mike says he's gonna come find him, suggesting that he doesn't know where he is because he was still trapped in the FNAF 1 back room. Yeah, William being locked in the back room is gonna cause a lot of problems for the lore going further. Let's talk about the non-canon ending. During the last night, you can go instead to a secret room and play a traditional FNAF game trying to stop Ennard. In this room is a Golden Freddy plushie with a walkie-talkie, and if you type 1983 into the wall, you see security features of FNAF 4 house. Also, during the Funtime Freddy segment, you see a map of the FNAF 4 room, the plush shop room, and the path from the FNAF 4 minigames. So basically, the Sister Location bunker was built underneath the FNAF 4 house, and the Fredbear plush wasn't the crying child's imaginary friend, but instead a security device probably used by William. Who gave the man the permit to build a massive robot dungeon under his home? We may never know. This game does a better job at actually explaining what the hell is going on, unlike FNAF 4, which is good, but the story doesn't really start making more sense. Like, none of this actually explains what happened in FNAF 4, and it's unclear how this even relates to the first 3 games. At least it seems like Dream Fury has been completely dropped, as the crying child never saw anything related to the Fun Times or Baby during FNAF 4. Luckily, there are less unsolved mysteries than in FNAF 4, and we can at least cross off the Fredbear plushie one, and the identity of the killer finally, but there's still some stuff we need to add. Okay, This one I don't really get why it's such a big deal. Basically, in Night 4 of this game, Baby puts us in a springlock suit while Ballor's mini arenas try to climb inside. About the suit, Baby says,
Don't be afraid. I'm not going to hurt you. I am only going to keep you for a little while. Try not to wiggle, though. You're inside something that came from my old pizzeria. I don't think it was ever used. At least not the way it was meant to be used. Too dangerous. I'd recommend that you keep the spring locks wound up. Your breathing and your heartbeat are causing them to come loose. You don't want them to get too loose. Trust me.
So this springlock suit was used in Baby's Pizzeria for a reason unknown, though considering the track record it was probably murder, but basically people just wanted to know what the springlock suit was. Perhaps it's Funtime Chica, even though that doesn't really make much sense. Next is what was William's motivation. I touched on this briefly during the Fnaf 4 section, but let me recontextualize it here. In this location, there's a random chance to see a blueprint of one of the 4 animatronics, and basically these blueprints tell us that these animatronics were made to capture kids. We can even see an amorphous blob that's kinda kid shaped inside of Funtime Freddy in his blueprint. That's why Elizabeth was killed by Baby. This wasn't an accident like the crying child. Baby lured her with an ice cream cone and grabbed her with a giant claw, as seen in Sister Location's death minigame. And William knew this would happen, as we hear in the cutscenes of Elizabeth whining about her daddy not letting her see Baby, and him never letting in.
Daddy, why won't you let me play with her? Daddy, you let the other children go see her. Why won't you let me go? Daddy, just once let me go play with her. She's so pretty and shiny. Didn't you make her just for me? Daddy, she can make balloons! Have you seen her make balloons? Oh, Daddy, let me go to her! Daddy isn't watching. Don't tell Daddy that I'm here. I wanted to watch a show too. I don't know why he won't let me come see you. You're wonderful. Where did the other children go?
So, why? Like, it's one thing for William to murder because he's a murderer, but building robots specifically made to capture kids?
What's going on?
So some think that William was experimenting with bringing people back to life with the animatronics, specifically to bring back his son, the crying child, which could explain the line, "I will put you back together" in Fnaf 4. He said that and meant it literally. But again, he would need to somehow know this could even happen, which means he saw an animatronic become possessed, which means he had to murder something beforehand. So that entire thing just falls apart. I guess you can argue that he was always a murderer, but after seeing animatronics come to life, he started to experiment using the Sister Location animatronics, and maybe a part of the motivation was to bring back the crying child. Personally, I feel like this makes the whole motivation pointless if it's not going to apply to all the murder, but I guess it's just a me thing. Next, when did Elizabeth get scooped? So we know Circus Baby World was open and shortly closed as found in the teaser for Sister Location. In other news, the grand opening of Circus Baby's Pizza World has apparently been cancelled due to reported gas leaks inside the building. Sources close to the establishment questioned the report, saying that the strange activity around the area at night suggests something else is to blame. One local quoted as saying, "Everything just stopped. There was so much excitement built around this place opening, and they just stopped talking about it. There's only a handful of people that ever got to look inside, kids from here or there, make sure everything worked right, I guess they weren't quite as ready as they thought they were." A tenant from across the street claimed to have witnessed a large group of cars surrounding the building during the night and large pieces of equipment being taken out of the building under tarps. A few weeks later, the building was for sale. There is no comment yet from the local entrepreneur who financed the venture. Elizabeth got scooped the day Circus Babies opened, and we know Sister Location takes place after Fnaf 1 but before Fnaf 3. And while I didn't bring it up, many agree that Fnaf 1 took place either around the 90s or early 2000s. To get this minimum wage math of a paycheck we get at the end of the 5th night, so some suggest that Elizabeth got scooped before even Fnaf 4. It's like when we see an empty room during the minigames which belonged to a girl due to Big Flower. This may also be why William was surveilling the entire house. He didn't want something like Elizabeth happening again. But that throws a wrench to people who think that he gave the Sister Location animatronic's child-catching features to experiment with bringing the dead to life, suggesting that this is after the crying child dies, so we don't know when that scoop happened. And finally, are the Fun Times possessed? Could have been that one. Before we burn, let's recap the main story so far. Freddy's Pizzeria's first location was Fredbear's Family Diner, and it featured 2 Springlock animatronics, Fredbear and Spring Bonnie. It was founded by William Afton and Henry. William's son got his frontal lobe bitten off in 1983. William's daughter Elizabeth was scooped by Circus Baby, shutting down Circus Baby's Pizza World during its grand opening. Elizabeth possessed Baby either before, after, or in the middle of William's kids' deaths. 5 kids were lured and killed by William in a Spring Bonnie suit. Their bodies were summoned into animatronic suits, those being Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, and Golden Freddy. The kids then began to possess the animatronics with the help of the puppet, who was another animatronic possessed by a kid done dirty by the Ripper fella. They now come alive at night. In 1987, a new and improved location opened now with the toy animatronics who have built-in facial recognition features and access to a criminal database, likely as a response to the missing children's incident. Also, someone got bitten by something during this year. This new pizzeria closed either due to an incident where William may have killed additional kids, or because of the aforementioned bite. After this closure, the toy animatronics will be scrapped, but the wizard ones are being kept for a hopeful reopening, and that reopening is the location we play as in the Fnaf 1 game. This location also closes. William opens Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rentals with the animatronics from the Circus Baby's Pizza World in an underground bunker below his house and tells his living son Michael to go find his sister there. It does, but his sister, who is Circus Baby, and her animatronic friends scoop out Mike's innards, fuse together, and pilot Mike, who is now an empty skin suit. Mike becomes what one might call a purple guy and barfs out innard. He lives on and now wants to find his dad. Around when this happens, William deconstructs the Fnaf 1 animatronics for reasons, and the spirits inside them, and he puts on his old spring bodysuit to I guess scare them off, but he then gets spring locked and trapped in that room, becoming Springtrap, who 30 years later is the main attraction of Fazbear Frights, which is a horror attraction based on the tragedies that happened in the previous locations. In Fnaf 3, we play minigames which allegedly freeze the original 5 spirits as well as the puppet. Fazbear Frights burns down and Springtrap maybe survives. He always seems to come back. And Mike, who is now a purple zombie, is trying to find him for revenge, yes. Yeah, things just got so complicated. During these recaps, I tried to only list out canon events, or at least things that are widely agreed upon. As you can quickly see, I don't have a lot to work with post Fnaf 4, and I'm sure there's going to be people who disagree with what I did with the timeline, even though I try to be as vague as possible. While Sister Location was a more fleshed out story than Fnaf 4, and left us with less unanswered questions, it started to muddle what came before. Mostly, it messed up the timeline after the Fnaf 1 location closes and before Fazbear Frights opens, which is an annoying thing that Scott begins to do. It's like he doesn't check his previous work to see if what he added messes up the events he established before. Before we go into the last game of the original story, I just want to discuss 2 lore details that are going to be relevant information for Pizza Sim and showcase just how needlessly complicated and sloppy the story gets. So remember when I said in the Sister Location custom night cutscenes we see Mike slowly turn purple as he's being piloted by Ennard? Do you see a problem with that? I'll let you guess. This and this are supposed to be 2 different characters, but of course people started to think that they were actually the same character because who wouldn't? Which made people theorize that Mike was actually the killer, which we find out he isn't, but who can blame them? Look, I understand that the color humans turn as they decompose is purple, but Scott, you really didn't see this coming when making the cutscene? Like, you could have made him blue or green, it had to be purple. This is the point I'm trying to get across. It seems like Scott doesn't think these things through. It's like the bite of 83. In the previous games, you see that someone got their frontal lobe bitten off during the bite of 87, so when people saw this in Fnaf 4, we all thought this was a bite of 87. But no, it was just a very similar event that happened 4 years prior. That's just not how you should go about writing a story. Imagine if in Harry Potter, we're told of a story of a wizard whose skin turned pale and he lost his nose. You'd think, oh, that's Voldemort. But no, it's just some other wizard who had a very similar appearance. That'd be bollocks. JK may not be a good writer or person or anything, but even she wouldn't do that. And as mentioned in the books and kind of referenced in Pizza Sim, Remnant made his first direct presence in Fnaf AR, and it is the perfect example to why this lore is needlessly complicated. In its most simple definition, Remnant is a manifestation of memories that can be infused with inanimate objects, which in this franchise is mainly liquid metal which can be transferred to different animatronics, which can allow them to come alive at night without having to stuff a dead kid in them. Simple. The only benefit Remnant has is now you can have animatronics come alive without having to have a kid die first. Some fans believe this is why the animatronics' sister location, Sans Baby, come alive. This is not a very substantial theory because a lot of it comes from the books. But basically, they believe that in Fnaf 3, that William deconstructed the Fnaf 1 animatronics to get Remnant out of them, and then use that Remnant to put into the fun times. So in Fnaf 3, the children's souls weren't technically released because they were still trapped into the fun time animatronics. Which, I don't really understand the point of all that, but sure. And there's other evidence that we will encounter later in Pizza Sim, but again, I'm not sure why Scott decided to make Remnant canon at the last second. Because now you have to keep track of these ghosts hopping from one animatronic to the next, like a wild goose chase.
Dive on in.
Reminds me of one summer day in the park. I was having just a delightful picnic with my good friend Orville. And I said to him, Orville, I have a story. And he said to me, what's the significance of the story? And I said to him, Orville, not every story has to have significance, you know? Sometimes a story is just a story. If you try to read into every little thing and find meaning in everything anyone says, you'll just drive yourself crazy. I had a friend do it once. Wasn't pretty. We talked about it for years. And not only that, but you'll likely end up believing something you shouldn't believe and thinking something you shouldn't think, or assuming something you shouldn't assume, you know? Sometimes, I said, a story is just a story. Maybe it doesn't mean anything at all. Maybe it doesn't mean anything at all.
It's time for me to finally give Scott a break. Because in this game, which is the final game in the original story, mind you, he actually solved more than one of the unsolved mysteries of the Fnaf lore. It's a miracle. So for Fnaf 6 aka Pizza Sim, you're gonna need some context about its release. This game was released a year after Sister Location, which in terms of Fnaf release dates was unheard of up to this point. These games would literally be released months ahead of schedule and would drop the same year. Going back to the Scott interview, Daco asked him why Pizza Sim took a year to release.
Okay, moving on to I'd say the highlight of your trollness. Five Nights at Freddy's 6. The game you originally planned to be a pizza simulator, an 8-bit pizza simulator, and everyone was like, okay, let's have it. And you released the whole game without anybody knowing anything for a whole year. Like, why? Just for the surprise.
Well, no, there actually was reasoning behind it. It wasn't just to be a troll, okay? And the reasoning was kind of complicated, and it was not a very fun. That was not a fun year. I mean, that was a game that was born out of necessity because I needed to kind of bring a conclusion to several events from the series. However, whenever I was in the early stages of it, and I think I'd released a very early idea that I was working on another game, but I think it was someone on Steam that just made a passing comment. It was just a passing comment. You know, nobody paid any attention to it. You know, he'd better not just start teasing a game like he always has been before. You know, because it's just not going to cut it anymore, or something like that. I don't know. It was just some passing comment, but it just made me start thinking. It's like this next game, I really can't do that. You know, I can't just do the same thing that I did before. I can't just start releasing teasers because. For some reason, at that time, I just knew that if I went through another year of just releasing teasers, that would give everybody a lot of fatigue. Like that would fatigue people. That would wear people out, and it was going to rub people the wrong way. You know, and I can't explain why I felt that way, but I just really felt that way. But at the same time, I needed to resolve a lot of issues with the story, and so those two factors combined. That's the way that I handled it the way that I did. I worked on that game for a year in secret, all the while the fan base was, you know, getting pretty agitated that, you know, I wasn't talking to them and I wasn't working on anything. But I knew that was the way that it just had to be. It had to be this way. This game could not have a lot of hype behind it because that wasn't the purpose. The purpose of it was not to make a lot of money. The purpose of it was not to build a lot of hype. It was just to resolve some plot points that people wanted to see. And so the result of that was me going into the dark for a year, and then just dropping a game, and there you have it.
Can you play that line again?
But at the same time, I needed to resolve a lot of issues with the story.
So Scott at this point knew that there were issues with the story at the final game. Anyways, listen, while this game does clear things up, it doesn't really solve everything because people to this day are still arguing about what the story these 6 games were trying to tell. And the games that preceded this are a whole other story that we're not going to get into. But anyways, if I was Scott, I would have clocked that there were issues with the story by like FNAF 4. Also, before I can talk about the lore, and for this game there's a lot of it, There's a story detail that for some reason Scott only decided to put into the source code of the teasers, even though you just heard him say he didn't want to put so much focus on teasers for this game, but whatever. Basically, it was an argument between Baby and the rest of the animatronics in Ennard. In the end, Baby is kicked out of Ennard, which is why in Pizza Sim the two are separate entities. In Pizza Sim, it's widely agreed upon that you play as Mike after the events of sister location. You're tasked with finding a new pizzeria, which is where the pizza simulator aspect of this game comes in. But none of that really matters. In actuality, you're tasked with bringing in 4 salvaged animatronics, which are actually characters from the past. Scrap Baby, which is Circus Baby, who is possessed by Afton's daughter Elizabeth, whose name we learned in this game. Scrap Chap, which is Springtrap, even though they look absolutely nothing alike, who has William's rotting corpse inside. Molten Freddy, which is the remains of Ennard, who some fans think is the remnant slushie of the 5 missing children victims. And Lefty, which was a trap to capture the puppet, who I guess is still here even after Happiest Day. Mike is tasked with bringing all the animatronics here so the man giving him instructions can burn them all and end everything once and for all. It's widely agreed upon that the man behind this plan is Henry, William's business partner for the Freddy's franchise, which was in the books. There's some details like the file names alluding to his name. He also says that the girl who possessed the puppet is his daughter, which would track because in the books Henry also had a daughter who was also killed by William. Oh, sorry for the book spoilers. Anyways, the ending scene of this game is actually very sad.
Connection terminated. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Elizabeth, if you still even remember that name, but I'm afraid you've been misinformed. You are not here to receive a gift, nor have you been called here by the individual you assume, although you have indeed been called. You have all been called here, into a labyrinth of sounds and smells, misdirection, and misfortune. A labyrinth with no exit, a maze with no prize. You don't even realize that you are trapped. Your lust for blood has driven you in endless circles, chasing the cries of children in some unseen chamber, always seeming so near, yet somehow out of reach. But you will never find them. None of you will. This is where your story ends. And to you, my brave volunteer, who somehow found this job listing not intended for you. Although there was a way out planned for you, I have a feeling that's not what you want. I have a feeling that you are right where you want to be. I am remaining as well. I am nearby. This place will not be remembered, and the memory of everything that started this can finally begin to fade away, as the agony of every tragedy should. And to you monsters trapped in the corridors, be still, and give up your spirits. They don't belong to you. For most of you, I believe there is peace, and perhaps more, waiting for you after the smoke clears. Although for one of you, the darkest pit of hell has opened to swallow you whole, so don't keep the devil waiting, old friend. My daughter, if you can hear me, I knew you would return as well. It's in your nature to protect the innocent. I'm sorry that on that day, the day you were shut out and left to die, no one was there to lift you up into their arms, the way you lifted others into yours. And then, what became of you? I should have known you wouldn't be content to disappear. Not my daughter. I couldn't save you then, so let me save you now. It's time to rest, for you, and for those you have carried in your arms. This ends, for all of us, in communication.
Please stop interrupting me.
It answers more lingering questions and ties a neat bow on this franchise. You finally see William defeated for good, at least in the original story. Again, we're not going to get into it. And the rest of the characters have their souls freed. Again. But this one was way more dramatic and #epic. In this game, there are also 3 8-bit minigames. In Fruity Maze, we see a girl playing a maze game while Spring Bonnie slowly creeps towards her. As you play the game, the fruit turns to a dead dog sprite, and William lures the girl away by saying that her dog is still alive. Basically, this game shows us who, in the Custom Night DLC, will learn to be the first missing children's incident victim, Susie, who ends up possessing Chica. Lore-wise doesn't add much, but it's a welcome inclusion for Scott to have added. Next, Security Puppet shows how the puppet was possessed. In a situation paralleled in the original Take Cake Fnaf 2 minigame, a girl is locked out of the pizzeria and William ends up taking them out. The puppet, who we learn is actually security animatronic specifically for this girl, is trapped by the other kids, and when he gets out, it's already too late. He finds the girl but malfunctions and shuts down due to the rain. Laying down beside her, it's assumed that this is how Charlie was able to possess the puppet, and how she was able to help the other kids possess their animatronics as well. Midnight Motorists. Okay, so you notice how those previous 2 minigames both had a simple story and were actually solvable? This one, not so much. So in this game, we play as the Orange Man, driving around town. He gets kicked out of a bar named Junior's and returns home to find, I guess, his child has run off to that place again. Next to his shutter window are some big animatronic footprints. Also, if you go to a secret path, you can find a grave site. So it's widely believed that the Orange Man is actually the purple guy. Now I know, those are 2 separate colors. That is obviously a purple guy and that's obviously an orange man. As I already stated before, Scott could care less about what colors he makes the sprites in these games. So people think this is William because in the game files, this minigame is titled later that night, and considering that it's raining, people think this takes place after the security puppet minigame, which is after William's kill. In the security puppet minigame, you can see tire tracks, and the Take Cake Fnaf 2 minigame, the purple guy drives off after the kill. It all fits together quite nicely. Also, the only other lore-relevant characters who could be this mysterious orange man is Henry, and maybe Mike, but there isn't any evidence that points to it being specifically either one, so let's just say it's William and Scott made him orange due to the two purple guys incident in 2016. That's actually all we know for sure. When the orange dude enters his house, there's a gray person watching TV that tells him basically to leave that kid alone. Is this Mike alluding to him watching TV like he did in Sister Location? Or is this the mysterious Mrs. Afton who looks stunning, might I add? We don't know. Which Afton child ran off? Was it Mike, Elizabeth, Crying Boy? We don't know. You know, Scott, for a game that was meant to tie up loose ends, you sure included a giant loose end. And that's not the only one. Candy Cadet isn't really a minigame, but he will sometimes tell you a story. The main theme of these stories is 5 things becoming 1. 5 keys become 1, 5 kittens become 1 snake's dinner, and 5 orphans get stitched together to fit into 1 coffin. What does this mean? Say it with me. We don't know. This may be where the missing children's incident souls being in the Funtime animatronics were now Molten Freddy theory that I mentioned earlier comes in. But yeah, there's nothing in these games that fully substantiates that. I mean, I would believe that's what Scott's intention was, but it's still not confirmed. Like in Sister Location, there's secret blueprints you find after getting one of the endings. There's one for Molten Freddy, Lefty, the thing that made Balloon Boy noises in Fnaf 3, and Sister Location Scooper. And there's the Remnant reference. Did Scott just make Remnant a thing to explain why there would be a giant scooper in Sister Location? Like, just say it was for ice cream. And before you're shown the blueprints, you see this. HRY. Henry. Thank God he put that there because I couldn't handle another unsolved mystery. Speaking of, back to the list for the last time. I think we know enough information about the puppet now to strike that one off. And we can also... Oh, well, no, we don't know. And that what I said. Confirmed. Wait. This game was supposed to tie up loose ends, and we only got one thing crossed off? And we have to add Midnight Motorist deal also? Oh wait, I forgot about the Custom Night DLC. Surely that will clear one of these things up. In Ultimate Custom Night, it's widely agreed upon that we play as William being trapped in some sort of purgatory after Pizza Sim. This is inferred through the Old Man Consequences cutscene and some of the animatronics dialogues. Oh yeah, most of them speak now. Who's putting him through the ringer? A spirit only referred to as the one you shouldn't have killed.
He's here and always watching. The one you shouldn't have killed. I have seen him. The one you shouldn't have killed. Greetings from the fire and from the one you should not have killed.
I am remade, but not by you, by the one you should not have killed.
I mean, I think he shouldn't have killed any of them, but whatever. So who is this? We don't... No, wait. In the very end, we see Golden Freddy twitching and fading into darkness. So, it's probably that. Yeah, okay. I'm gonna add the one you shouldn't have killed also to the list, as well as the fun times, are they possessed or not. And also I'm gonna alter when did Elizabeth get scooped to when did any of the major deaths happen. I'm talking about the missing children's incident, the puppet's possession, Elizabeth's scoop, and the crying child's bite. The only thing we know about the missing children's incident is that Chica died first.
I was the first. I have seen everything.
And in Pizza Sim's gravestone ending, we are given the 5 names of the missing children's incident victims. Gabriel, Fritz, Susie, Jeremy, and... Can someone, mow that piece of grass over there? Now, considering that Chica is the only girl of the group, we can assume that Susie is Chica. So we know that Susie died first. And we of course also know that the crying child's bite was in 1983. And now, my recap of the story of Fnaf, the original story. Freddy Pizzeria's first location was Fredbear's Family Diner, and it featured 2 Springlock animatronics, Fredbear and Spring Bonnie. It was founded by William Afton and Henry. William's son got his frontal lobe bitten off in 1983. William's daughter Elizabeth was scooped by Circus Baby, shutting down Circus Baby's Pizza World during its grand reopening. Elizabeth possessed Baby. Either before, after, or in the middle of William's kids' deaths, 5 kids were lured and killed by William in a Spring Bonnie suit, as well as Henry's daughter who possessed the puppet. Their bodies were summoned to the animatronic suits, those being Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, and Golden Freddy. The puppet helped the kids possess the animatronics, making them come alive at night. In 1987, a new and improved location opened, now with the toy animatronics who have built-in facial recognition features and access to a criminal database, likely in response to the missing children incident. Also, someone got bitten by something during this year. This new pizzeria closes either due to an incident where William may have killed additional kids, or because of the aforementioned bite. After its closure, the toy animatronics will be scrapped, but the winter ones are being kept for a whole free opening, and that reopening is of the location we play as in the Fnaf 1 game. This location also closes. William opens Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rentals, with the animatronics from Circus Baby's Pizza World in an underground bunker below his house, and tells his living son Michael to go find his sister there. He does, but his sister, who is Circus Baby, and her animatronic friends scoop out Mike's innards, fuse together, and pilot Mike, who is now an empty skin suit. Mike becomes what one might call a purple guy, and barfs out innard. He lives on and now wants to find his dad. Around when this happens, William deconstructs the Fnaf 1 animatronics for reasons, and the spirits inside them haunt him, and he puts on his old spring bodysuit to, I guess, scare them off. But he then gets spring locked and trapped in that room, becoming Springtrap, who 30 years later is the main attraction of Fazbear Frights, which is a horror location based on the tragedies that happened in the previous locations. During FNAF 3, we play minigames which allegedly freeze the original 5 spirits as well as the puppet. Actually, scratch that entire thing. Fazbear Frights burns down and Springtrap survives. He always seems to come back, and Mike, who is now a purple zombie, is trying to find him. Also, Ennard kicks out Baby out of the metal spaghetti. Mike works with Henry to lure the remaining animatronics to finish this once and for all. Together, Mike, Henry, Baby, the puppet, and whatever is a Molten Freddy burn and their spirits are released. Except Williams, his is taken to a never-ending purgatory created by the one he shouldn't have killed, whoever that may be. The end.
Dearest Augustine, I do hope this latest damp has not aggravated your gray lung. Dip, 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 dip. Matters stateside have taken a tragic turn as this year's gourd crop has fallen prey to a rather unexpected infestation of salt marsh cutworms. Dip, 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 dip.
Peter, it's 4 in the morning. Come to bed.
Marital concerns continue to bedevil me.
The derailment of the Five Nights at Freddy's lore was not because Scott was a bad storyteller. From FNAF 1 to 3, Scott was able to tell a fairly consistent and well put together story. Sure, there were unsolved mysteries and things that were left vague, but for the most part it wasn't anything that would make the story hard to follow. There were any plot holes, retcons, or any telltale signs of someone who was just bad at storytelling. That, however, changed with FNAF 4. I keep going back to that Steam post he made and keep wondering what his intention was. He knew that the community didn't get the story he was trying to tell, and instead of doubling down, he decided to change course. Would the community accept it that way? Does not sound like the words of someone who is confident in their story. So here's my theory. Scott was going to conclude the story at FNAF 3, but decided to change course due to the fan reception to that game, specifically its jump scares. He designed FNAF 4 to be his scariest yet, with its spookiest models, a setup just prone for horror. You play as a child in a dark room having to peer out of looming hallways, check your bed and closet, all while being haunted by nightmares. However, Scott had a problem, because he concluded the story, so how is this game going to fit into everything? He could have just made it non-canon, but since a large part of the fanbase was so obsessed with the story, he knew he couldn't have just given them nothing. So he decided to make this game almost entirely irrelevant by having the night segments be a dream, or I guess coma nightmare, and the 8-bit minigames will give the actual important lore bits. The problem is that this is a different method to tell the story in comparison to the first 3 games, so the fan needed more time to think about it. To Scott, this was unusual. Quote from the Steam post, "You know, when I released the first game over a year ago, I was amazed at how quickly everyone found every bit of lore and story. Then the same thing happened in part 2. Fans and YouTubers dug in and found everything. Game Theory did an incredible video on part 2, getting almost everything right. Then part 3 came out, and once again the story was uncovered by the community. It seems that there was nothing I could hide, but then I released part 4 and somehow, no one, not a single person found the pieces." Once again, he thought he let the community down just like with the FNAF 3 jump scares, only this time it was with FNAF 4's story. Sure, in a Steam post he dresses it up in a way that makes it seem like he actually likes how nobody got the story, and it was a fitting conclusion. Okay, Scott. I believe that the story that Scott was trying to tell in FNAF 4 was either Dream Theory or a variation of Dream Theory, and once he realized the community would not accept it that way, he pivoted in sister location. You see, FNAF 4 would make sense if Dream Theory was still on the table, but since Scott pivoted, now you have a game that's a mess to figure out whenever someone makes a theory about this franchise. The problem with sister location onwards is that I believe Scott started to purposely not answer lingering questions. If you keep the story vague, it makes it easier to not accidentally introduce a retcon. Also, the fans may not like his answers. Would the community accept it that way? In sister location, the only lingering questions he answered was related to FNAF 4 with the security cameras in the bunker, and that was only so he can definitively dismiss Dream Theory and also clear up the Bite 87-83 debacle with the 1983 code. And even though he doesn't outright admit it post FNAF 4, he got a lot of story beats from the original novel trilogy, and I would wouldn't blame him because you have a fully written out and mostly comprehensible story right there that for the most part aligns with the pre-existing canon, so why not utilize it? Let's not forget Fnaf World. After Fnaf 4 and before Sister Location, its story provided a connection with Fnaf 3 and Fnaf 4. To summarize the story, during the game you play mini-games that correlate to the good ending mini-games in Fnaf 3. In the final cutscene we have lines like, "We are still your friends," and of course, "I will put you back together," which ties back to the final scene of Fnaf 4 with the crying child's death. I would say this does a better job of continuing the story of Fnaf 4 than its Sister Location. Alas, there are many problems with Fnaf World, and Scott ended up deeming it a failure. We then have Fnaf 6, where Scott tried to do the right thing by the community by giving them an satisfying finale. But at this point, a satisfying finale to the fans would be to finally answer their biggest questions. But not only would he have to double check his answers to make sure they're consistent with the 5 games worth of story, but also make sure that it's an answer most everyone would be satisfied with. You see the problem? How in the world can you put a bow on all this? No wonder this game took so much time in development. It actually wasn't very long, but in comparison to the previous FNAF games it was. So what did he end up doing? He did give this game a very conclusive ending, and in that ending he gave some clear answers like the origin of the puppet, which most people already knew by FNAF 2, and honestly I can't get mad at him for this because what else could he have done? If he made it a goal to answer most of the lingering questions in this game, there would be so much discourse and division in the community, and thus an unsatisfying conclusion to the game. So what am I trying to say? The reason why the story of FNAF fell apart is because of you. Okay, not actually you, but more so Scott's fear of disappointing you, who I assume is a fan of this franchise. If you're not, then just ignore this. It was first with FNAF 3. The fans were disappointed with the game scares, so he made FNAF 4. But then the fans were having trouble understanding the story and were disappointed with the likely answer, so he made FNAF World to try to tie the story back to the original 3 games. But no one liked FNAF World except for a few selected people, including me, so he made Sister Location, which didn't really tie back to their previous games, but instead tried to dismiss the story being told in FNAF 4. But the fans had even more questions after Sister Location, so he finally decided to put an end to this and release Pizza Sim, and hopefully give the fans a satisfying conclusion, which I say it did for the most part until Security Breach may have completely abandoned that entire ending, but again we're not talking about that game. I mean, I guess you could say Scott made the story purposely vague, not to disappoint the fans, but instead because theorizing was one of the main things keeping this franchise thriving. The original success came from the Let's Plays, but after FNAF 2, I would say that the novelty of FNAF wasn't its scares, but instead its lore. I know that's the reason I became a fan. I watched one map video and the rest was history. I never even played any of the games, except for FNAF World, and I feel like that's a shared experience with most of the OG fans who stuck around. Anyways, I don't feel like Scott's main reason for making the story as vague as possible was so there would be a large fears community. Maybe it was a factor, but if he really wanted his franchise to go on, he wouldn't have made plans to end the games at most 4 separate times. Kinda like FNAF 4 the final chapter. Please. I don't know, maybe I was just giving him too much of the benefit of the doubt. But honestly, I don't feel like it was Scott's intention for this story to be filled in by theorists, unlike other mascot horror games. I think he was honestly having a lot of trouble post FNAF 3, making something that would have been accepted by the community, and that fear made it hard for him to continue that story. So I guess the real killer was performance anxiety. So how could it have been fixed? I think the best fix would have been to actually end it at FNAF 3, and just make FNAF 4 either non-canon or a full-on reboot. But if we had to keep the 6 games, a small change would have been to clearly define dates. Remember how in FNAF 1 and FNAF 2 you got a paycheck, and in FNAF 2 it actually said the year? This should have been in all the games. Something as simple as that would have already helped the story greatly, because you would actually know what events have and haven't happened yet when playing the games. And if I were Scott, I would have made like a Crib Notes Google Docs that goes over the main story he wanted to tell, and decided which parts he would tell in which games, which I know he didn't have because he didn't even know how many games there were gonna be. But none of that matters because Scott is retired now, at least from the games. And now all the reins have been held to Steelwool, whose track record for lore is, I feel like, arguably worse than Scott's. Yeah, I'm not going to be talking about FNAF VR, Security Breach, or Ruin, or VR2, because that lore is a whole other mess, with very different reasons as to why it got confusing. And I think that could actually make a very interesting video, wink wink nudge nudge, but we'll see what happens with this one. Speaking of video, thank you for watching my first ever video. If you're making it all the way through, like, good on you. And don't be afraid to like, subscribe, and turn on those notifications, and hit the bell, and whatever else YouTube wants you to do. And also let me be clear, this won't be a FNAF channel. This is more like a general media review and analysis channel, whatever that means. My next video is going to be on a completely different fandom, with a completely different series, but if you want to see a part 2 to this FNAF video that does explore the Steelwool games, don't be afraid to sound off on the comments, guys. So I hope to see you again soon. Yeah, I'm talking to you. You specifically. And yeah, don't forget to smile.